other night, I was driving home from work when I had to take a detour. A tornado had ripped through and completely destroyed the road that I usually take. The only way back was a patchwork of narrow back roads, the kind that don't even show up properly on a GPS. Normally, I would have taken about 30 minutes to get home, but that's not how things went. About halfway, I saw a thick carpet of white fog that stretched across the road. Dense and low, just sitting there like it didn't belong, which it didn't. It was July, a warm evening, just after 9 p.m., still dusk. There shouldn't have been any fog. I slowed down instinctively and crept into it. Visibility dropped instantly. Everything felt quiet and muffled, like sound couldn't even push through the air anymore. Then, thunk, I ran over something. I stopped, opened the door, and got out. The fog was so heavy I could barely see past my own arm, even as I waved it in front of my face. But when I looked down at the road behind my car, I think I saw a raccoon, or what used to be one. Its body was twisted, covered in what looked like mold, but not normal mold. This was black and white, stringy, with sharp, spiky filaments sticking out of its fur. Parts of it pulsed slightly, like it was reacting to something. I backed up slowly, got in the car, and drove the rest of the way home in silence. Weird shit happens out here sometimes on the Indian reservation. When I finally pulled into my driveway, I was met with one last surprise. A crater-sized pothole left behind by the same cyclone that had messed up the road. My car slammed down with a sickening screech that made me wince. "Nah, fuck," I said, in a flat, monotone voice, already knowing I'd done some kind of damage that I have to deal with later. Once inside, I tossed my keys and bag on the counter and didn't think about anything again that night. I had the next day off, so I let myself sleep in. The following morning, I went out to inspect the aftermath. Jacked the car up, pulled the tire off, and crouched down to get a better look. Turns out I just dented the exhaust pipe. Annoying, but nothing catastrophic. I've fixed worse with a hammer and a bad attitude. Honestly, I wouldn't even be writing any of this down if it wasn't for what happened next. While putting the tire back on, I got some old brake fluid on my hands. Not just a little grime. My palms were coated. I washed up and didn't think much of it. The next morning, I went to work, and nothing seemed off until after a quick bathroom break, I came back to my desk and sat down. That's when I noticed my keyboard. The keys that I'd touched were smeared with something brown. I stared at my hands, and the spots where they'd rested on the keys were dark and grimy, slightly tacky. Ugh, what the hell? I murmured in disgust. Probably leftover brake fluid or oil or whatever that stuff was. I grabbed a paper towel, wiped the mess off of the keys, and tried to refocus. Since I can touch type, I don't mean to brag, I don't look at my hands too often. But when I finally did, I saw that my hands were red, like raw meat red. And from the creases in my palms, a dirty brownish fluid was slowly oozing out. Thick, slow, and glistening. Panic didn't hit me all at once. It kind of tiptoed in while my brain caught up. I shot up from my desk and power walked to the bathroom, trying to open the door with my knee like some kind of contortionist. I fumbled for a good 20 seconds before finally giving in and just opening the door with my hands like a normal person. It wasn't until I saw the streak I left on the door that I realized this wasn't normal. Okay, maybe that brake fluid was toxic? Maybe I'm having some kind of allergic reaction. It's probably fine. I'll just wash them again. I told my boss I wasn't feeling great and asked if I could go home early. He didn't say anything at first, just glanced up from his screen. Then his eyes locked onto my hands, and he pushed back from his desk with a look of horror on his face. "What the fuck is wrong with your hands? Go home!" A bit dramatic, honestly. I'm sure they were kind of purplish now and dripping that weird liquid every few seconds, but I've seen worse. Definitely wasn't something to yell about. I got home and immediately went at them with one of those harsh green dish pads, the kind you're not supposed to use on nonstick pans. I scrubbed until they felt raw. For a moment, I thought I made progress, but about a minute later, that gunk started oozing right back out of every pore. By the next morning, My hands had fully ballooned up and had become completely immovable. It was nice, the oozing had stopped, but my fingers were gone, just absorbed into the swelling. What used to be hands were now more like a pair of flesh mittens with no clear seams. I needed to check in with work, so I used my 2 nubs to mash at my phone until it dialed my boss. He picked up. "Hey, so my hands are kind of worse than yesterday," I said. "Just come in and we'll decide once you get here." I didn't think I could really do much work with my hands in their current blob state, so I opened FaceTime and picked up the phone with my mouth. "You can see I can't really do much of anything with my hands," I said around the phone, my words garbled by the fact that I was basically chewing on the speaker. When my boss's face appeared on the screen, his eyes nearly popped out of his skull. "Holy fuck, Matthew! You need to go to the ER right now. That is not normal. That is not okay." "What is it?" I spit out the phone. "No, I think I'm good. I just need a day off," I said, and then hung up with my nose. I started thinking about the possibilities, everything I could do with a whole day off and nothing to fix. Naturally, I landed on laying in bed and watching a movie. Using the remote with my toes wasn't so bad after a few minutes of trial and error, and one accidental rental of a Spanish cooking documentary, but I got the hang of it. I finally settled on a movie called Predecessor of Phantoms. It was fine. Not quite the typical type of movie I'd watch with all the killing and stuff, but most of my attention was on my hands, which had started to tingle. Not the regular fell asleep on your arm tingle, but a deeper one, inside, like something was stirring. By the time the credits rolled, I glanced down again. "Hey, let's go! I can move them again!" I said, wiggling what used to be fingers. But then I paused. I wasn't the one moving them. Something under my skin was squirming. And then, like it was timed for dramatic effect, a tiny black shape popped out from one of the holes that had been oozing sludge earlier. Before I could react, I was giggling uncontrollably while trying to scratch my hands with my teeth. The movement must have annoyed whatever it was, because suddenly more of those black things poked out, flailing around like they were trying to grab me. And then a small, slightly translucent spider crawled right out of my hand. I watched as it skittered across the sheets, pounced on a fly, wrapped it in a web like a little burrito, and then casually walked back into my hand like it was a little apartment or something. I couldn't believe it. Spiders living in my hands. Sure, they were contributing to the bug situation, which was somewhat helpful, I guess. And that didn't exactly solve the major issue, the fact that there were fucking spiders living in my hands. Anyway, I figured I was overreacting. I rolled out of bed with a sigh, shuffled to the kitchen, hoping I could at least grab something to eat. I hadn't eaten since yesterday afternoon, maybe? I vaguely remember slapping together a few slices of bread with probably about a pound of cheese on them. I opened the fridge and stared at a giant tub of spinach. Why the hell do I have this? I muttered to myself, forgetting that I'd been to a work party last weekend. Apparently, I got drunk enough to come home with all the leftover vegetables. I tried to gently lift the nearly 2-pound container of raw spinach, but as I set it down on the counter, a dozen or so of those tiny legs scattered besides it. Sorry, y'all. I stuck my head in and took a bite of the green leaves. One chew was enough. I immediately regretted it and pulled my head back out. And then a thought hit me. I hovered my hands over the tub. Maybe the spiders want some. As if on cue, a few larger black spiders crawled out, huddled together, and began what looked like a coordinated effort to lift a spinach leaf. I laughed out loud watching them hoist it until I heard a teeny sound, and they all dropped it back into the tub. Yeah, I feel you guys, I said to the spiders, still amused and impressed how they'd collectively lifted the spinach leaf. I picked up the tub, cradling it gently in my arm like a fragile, leafy newborn, and I tossed it into the trash where all vegetables belong. Not wanting to crush any more of my 8-legged skin mates, I lifted one leg and tried to open the cabinet above the stove with my toes. I nearly toppled over a few times, but somehow managed to swing the door open. I reached in and pinched a box of crackers between my 2 flesh mitts, dumping the last 2 sleeves on the counter. Then I grabbed a knife to cut them open, which resulted in a chaotic explosion of crumbs across every single flat surface in sight. Damn it! But then, without warning, hundreds of spiders came pouring out from what you could now describe as the apartment complex my hands had apparently become. They started swarming through the kitchen, spinning webs thick and fast, turning the air hazy, kind of like fog but stickier. I stood frozen, unsure what was happening, until the mist began to settle. And the mess was gone. Completely gone. The crackers, the crumbs, even the knife, which was kind of concerning, all cleaned up. I heard a faint beeping, and then another, and another. Little chirps echoing around the kitchen, like microwave timers going off. I slowly turned and saw that the spiders again had now grouped into 6 tidy clusters, like little tactical units. One of the bigger spiders climbed up on the lip of the counter, turned towards me and spoke. The 6 clusters gathered behind it, in their little formations. Then they started talking amongst each other, clicking, chittering, twitching. Not English. It almost sounded like Spanish, but it was way too fast, too scrambled, like Telemundo on fast forward while somebody's chewing aluminum foil. One dragged a crumb towards me and held it up like an offering. Another spider added in. I tilted my head. Thanks? Is this like a peace offering or something? And they all froze. One let out a high-pitched pop and started skittering in a circle. The rest joined in like they were arguing. I shrugged. Look, I don't speak spider. If this is about the rent, you guys already cleaned the kitchen, so we're probably good for now. They paused. Then one of them climbed up on my arm, bit off one of its own legs, and webbed it to my forearm like some kind of messed up little hairy friendship bracelet. It leapt off and rejoined the formation. I was left speechless. I didn't know what. I still don't know what that was, what it meant, or why. But I stood there for a second, speechless and wholly unsure of how to process this. And then I wandered over to the freezer and pulled out a tub of ice cream. I plopped it onto the counter, grabbed a spoon and a bowl, but then I realized there was no way to scoop any without squashing the spiders that were still burrowed in my hands. And it was probably all the women and children too. I looked down at them. Family-friendly zone, right? You guys good? No reaction. I motioned to the ice cream. They just stared at me, or at least they twitched like they were staring. So I shrugged, dipped the stump of my index finger into the tub, got a little ice cream on it, and held it out in front of the big spider, the one that had first tried talking to me. It crept forward, and then back up, and then forward again, while it was trying to fake me out or something. After a few feints, it stopped and blurted,
¿crees que soy tonto? Sé que eso es veneno, idiota.
"Oh, come on, I'm just trying to feed y'all," I said. At that moment, the translucent one, the flycatcher, as I'd begun to call him, emerged again, scurried over, tasted the ice cream off my hand, then promptly crawled back inside me like it was clocking out after a shift. Shortly after, another one from the 6th Regiment waddled over and took a cautious lick of the ice cream. Then it paused, raised 2 legs in the air, and immediately started spasming, toppling off my hand and rolling a few times across the counter. A bunch of the others rushed over. I think they did their own little version of spider CPR, tapping on it, lifting tiny legs. A few seconds later, it wobbled upright with some help from the medics. And then one by one, all the other spiders started clicking their legs together in sync. "Are y'all applauding them?" I asked. Must have been EMT spiders or something. I guess dairy hits them hard. I walked over to the freezer, grabbed some sausage, and nuked it in the microwave. The entire spider mob stared at me the whole time, like I was performing some sacred rite. And without saying a word, they huddled together in a fuzzy conference. One of them pulled out a bunch of tiny sticks, and one by one, they each drew. As the group dispersed, all the others cleared a wide berth around one single spider. It was holding a tiny little nub of a stick. Now, Now, mind you, the thing was barely the size of a dime, but I swear I could see the pure dejection on its face, like it had fully accepted I was about to die nobly for its fellow spiders. Then, a slightly smaller spider approached, followed by about 30 really small spiders trailing behind. They huddled together in a quiet, solemn chat. I realized with some horror that he was saying goodbye to his family. Just then, the microwave beeped, letting me know the sausage was thawed. And with that, his wife and kids scurried off, leaving him standing alone on the counter with his short stick and the weight of fate on his fuzzy little shoulders. He turned slowly to the platoon commander, gave a solemn, double-armed salute like a tiny soldier heading to certain doom, then pivoted to face the microwave, resolute and awaiting whatever came next. I pulled out the now steaming sausage, cut off a small piece, and placed it gently in front of him like it was an offering at a shrine. We both waited. Him for destiny. Me for, I don't know, a Yelp review? Anyway, I tried to prove to the little guy that I wasn't trying to poison anyone, so I just shrugged and popped the rest of the sausage in my mouth. See? Not poisonous. Y'all are tripping. That didn't go over well. Apparently, eating the sausage myself didn't say, peace offering. It said, this is your fate. Every spider within eyesight instantly shrieked. Yeah, actual shrill little spider screams. They bolted behind cups, under appliances, into drawers. It's like a full-scale evacuation. Like I just delivered a death sentence on all of them. I stood there chewing, watching legs disappear into the shadows. Wow, dramatic much. I swallowed the bite of sausage, looked around and then down at my hands. I think I had the start of a headache. I walked over to where all the spiders were hiding. Listen, I've had it up to here with y'all, I said, placing my hands on the counter, then raising them a few inches for dramatic effect. I heard a tiny gasp from somewhere in the crowd. I'm going to my room. I want some me time. So get the rest of your women and children out of my hands before I squish somebody by accident. I gave my hands a small shake to drive the point home. A beat passed and then, flip, a few thick webs dropped onto the counter. Seconds later, hundreds of tiny spiders began rappelling down like special ops agents in a bug-sized heist movie. I went to my room, collapsed onto the bed. I needed a break, just a minute of nothing. But then I caught a whiff of myself. Yeah, no. I got up and dragged myself to the bathroom. A long bath sounded like the bare minimum. I sank into the hot water, finally relaxing for the first time in whatever the hell this week was. At some point, I dozed off. When I woke up, the tub water was lukewarm, and my towel, which I had folded neatly on the ledge of the tub, was now hanging on the rack. Except it wasn't just hanging, it was webbed, laced through with intricate purple silk, like some kind of shimmering spider lace. I stared. How the hell did they move it? I blinked, still groggy. Hey, I appreciate the fancy towel, but you know it's not gonna stay on there. Like, the steam's gonna mess it up. My only answer was a chorus of high-pitched spider jabber echoing off the tile walls. I dried off and wrapped myself in the spider-laced terry cloth, which did immediately dissolve the web. I made my way over to the sink to brush my teeth. That's when I saw what else they had done. Right there on the counter, near the faucet, a throne. Honestly, it was pretty impressive. Made out of flossers, Q-tips, a bottle cap, what looked like perfectly folded Kleenex as a cape draped behind it. Purple webbing ran across the back like royal embroidery. And it even had armrests. Tiny toothpick-sized armrests. I think I stared at it for a solid 5 seconds before muttering, okay, this feels like a trap. Behind the soap dispenser, one spider peeked out and gave me a little wave with 2 legs. What the hell is this supposed to mean? I said, throwing my hands up at the weird little throne-looking thing. Is your queen supposed to sit here? It looks like it'll fall apart if I blink at it. Of course, no response. Just a soft glimmer of silk in the bathroom light, and the little spider scampering across the counter and then out of the room. I got dressed and headed for the living room. only to stop dead in my tracks when I saw the swarm. Every single spider was in my bedroom. I slapped my forehead with a mushy hand. How am I supposed to get these things out of here? I walked in and gently unhooked one of the webs hanging from the ceiling. There was a spider in it, bundled up with a cocoon of silk like it had just been chilling. It crawled out and climbed onto my hand, heading towards one of the holes that they'd been using to sneak in and out of my body. I cut it off. No, you're not crawling back in there. The spider stopped, turned around slowly, indignantly, and threw up 5 of its legs in a flabbergasted manner, like it was absolutely done with my nonsense.
¡Pedazo de mierda! ¡Esta es nuestra casa!
It snapped. I looked around the room and spotted a thick cluster of webbing in the corner. It had to be the queen's nest or something close to it. I walked over, trying to get their attention. Before I'd even stopped moving, a crowd had already formed. Perfect. That was exactly what I needed. "One moment, y'all," I said, raising a finger. I ran outside and yanked the bug zapper off of the hook on the front porch. Flipping it upside down, I scooped out as many flies as I could into the front of my shirt like a pouch. Then I rushed back inside to the swarm. As soon as I stepped through the door, my phone started ringing. It was my boss. I answered, slapped it on speaker, and cradled the sagging bundle of bug corpses. "Hey Matt, how are your hands doing? You have gone to the doctor, right?" I heard Mr. Carlo's voice ring out from the phone. Yeah, Mr. Carlo. Yeah, I went," I said, trying to sound as normal as possible as I tossed the phone onto the bed. They haven't got back to me yet. They're, still running tests or something." Without missing a beat, I turned to the spiders, walked over to the counter, and dumped the fly-filled bundle from my shirt. Instantly, the skitter squad went nuts. The dead flies vanished in about 2.5 seconds. I swear I even saw one of them do a cartwheel. Then they started screaming, like grateful screaming, I think. It wasn't like before when their screeching had the same kind of energy as a parent catching their kid trying to drink Windex. Now it was more like someone shouting from across the yard because you showed up with ribs and 3 different kinds of soda. "Who is that?" Carlo asked. "Oh, I just have a cooking documentary playing in the background." "That sounded like Spanish. Do you know Spanish?" "No, yeah, I mean, it is Spanish, but I don't know how to speak it. I was just scrolling through channels and thought it might have a good recipe or something." Well, I do expect an update from you about when you can come back to work." Just then, the spiders started chanting in unison.
¡Más comida! ¡Más comida! ¡Más comida! ¡Más comida!
I whipped back to the phone. "I'll let you know as soon as I hear back from the doctor," Carlos started to reply. "That was definitely..." I hung up. I laid my hands in front of the group, hoping they'd climb on. And to my surprise, they did, without trying to reclaim my body as their colony again. I carried the pile of wiggling, black, spiky legs down the hall to the empty room at the end. It didn't have anything in it, but hey, at least it wasn't my bed or my room. I figured I could get them some stuff eventually. What kind of furniture do spiders even want? Giant foam hands, maybe? I don't know. I went back outside, scooped the last of the flies from the zapper, and hung it back up. "I'll make sure to keep this thing running from now on," I said aloud, as if I had some kind of fly hunting subscription plan. I dumped the bug haul in the middle of the new spider room like it was a housewarming gift, and walked back into my own room to grab the next group of tenants. I plopped the spiny blob down. "Y'all gonna eat?" They didn't respond. They just sat there, all spindly and suspicious. Could spiders even smell? Do they know there's like 200 flies just waiting for them? I got a couple of the dead bugs and made a little breadcrumb trail, fly crumb trail, for them to follow. Hopefully the rest would catch on and scuttle over from the other room. I grabbed my keys, my wallet off the counter, and headed out to the car. But I stopped cold when I felt that awful tickle in my hand. No, not again. Turned back around and stormed into the spider room. Most of them were just lounging. Yes, lounging in little webbed up hammocks and what looked like silk lawn chairs. I squatted down in front of the group and got their attention. Pointed up my hand, and to get the point across, let out a high-pitched screech and dramatically flopped my hand onto the floor like it had just died in agony. The spiders gasped. A few of them scrambled over in concern. They climbed up on my hand. I could hear their voices in my bones, feel something shifting inside the muscle. And after a few seconds of mounting pressure, a massive 3-inch spider squirmed its way out. How the hell were you in there? I had the queen this whole time? They didn't even seem mad, just busy. About 40 more spiders ran in and came back out, each carrying tiny egg sacs, 3 per leg, on each of the 4 legs that they weren't using to walk. They just kept coming. By the time they finished unloading their spawn, my hands were finally back to a mostly normal size, though now I had 3 concerningly large holes in my skin. Alright, I said, standing up and brushing off my pants. I'll be back in about 2 hours. Then I got into the car and drove to the clinic, hoping I could talk my way into a checkup without an appointment. The doctor froze mid-exam, his gloved fingers hovering inches from my hand like it had started ticking.
You said this started when?
I shrugged. I don't know, a few days ago? It all kind of blurred together. He didn't respond right away, just leaned in, squinting. Then he quickly pulled back like my hand was a live grenade with legs, which, to be fair, it sort of was. Then a spider peeked out from under my thumbnail, tilted its head, and waved a leg. The doctor blinked.
Did that thing just wave at me?
Yeah, that one's actually pretty polite.
Polite?
He stood up abruptly and hit the intercom on the wall like it owed him money.
Nurse, I'm gonna need infectious disease, parasitology, and probably psychiatry, and maybe someone from wildlife control, and a priest.
While waiting, he doused his hands in sanitizer and started mumbling to himself.
12 years of school for this. I should have been a podiatrist. Feet don't wave at you.
There must have been a few stragglers left in my hands, but he never even touched me, so I don't know why he needed to wash his hands. Anyway, he tried to prescribe a bunch of unnecessary stuff. I'm not about to waste money on some overpriced cream when I've got perfectly good triple antibiotic ointment at home. Then they offered me a steroid shot like I'm some kind of fragile little flower. Please. The whole visit was probably just a big waste of time. I made it back home, filled up a big soup pot with Epsom salts and water, heated it up and soaked my hands in it. I think I saw something on YouTube that said it was good for cuts or something. I must have fallen asleep like that because I woke up still sitting on the floor. The spiders had connected webs to my back and head, keeping me upright overnight. Honestly, it was kind of sweet of them. I woke up and called my boss. Yeah, sorry for all the confusion. I couldn't really do anything yesterday. I had zombie ant disease in my hand. Cordyceps, it's a real thing. You can Google it. I think he believed me. The red color had gone away, but now they were all pruned up and looked like I had aged 40 years overnight. I went to check on my little arachnid roommates. They were all dangling from the ceiling in a floating village of white silk cocoons. I spotted the big black one and held my hand beneath its web to see if it wanted to come along. It hopped down. I felt the familiar prickle of its 8 little claws clutching my skin. I walked to the kitchen and opened up the fridge. Waited a second. Nothing. I opened the freezer. Anything you want here, buddy? It pointed 2 legs frantically towards the oven and the pepper grinder, and then shrieked.
Dame más moscas. Las quiero. Aquí. Ahora.
I don't really think those are your thing, bud, but I'll make you some of those sausages. I cooked up the whole bag and served it on the biggest plate I had. They were still a little hesitant at first, but once the first spider didn't keel over and die, the rest dug in. I sat there watching them for a bit. Then I noticed the little one, the one that they'd chosen to eat the meat originally, had jumped onto my leg. What's up, little guy? I asked, holding out my hand next to him. He crawled up, dropped the tiny stick he'd been carrying, and then skittered back to the group. These are some strange little creatures I had here. The next few days were mostly just getting used to all their odd little requests and routines. On the second night with them finally out of my hands, I went to take a shower, only to find them all crowded in the bathroom sink. They'd managed to plug the drain and were using it as a swimming pool. Yesterday, my hands were finally usable again, so I took a few of the little creepy crawlers out with me to the store to see if they wanted anything. I grabbed a bunch of different kinds of meat, beef, pork, lamb, whatever I could find. Figure I'd let them decide what they liked best. Honestly, these little guys are starting to grow on me. maybe this is what having kids is like. Last night, work was stressful, and by the time I got home, all I wanted was a bowl of chili and to pass out. But the moment I stepped inside, the house sounded like that nursery rhyme with the monkeys jumping on the bed. It was absolute chaos. These spiders were in the middle of some kind of heated dispute. I laughed when I heard all their tiny voices arguing and just headed to the kitchen to make some food. I cooked up 4 pounds of pork, tossed it into a big bowl with some beans, sauces, and chopped potatoes, and then walked into the room. A few of them spotted me, pointed, and jabbered something excitedly, and suddenly the whole crowd was cheering. We had dinner right there on the floor. Once again, I fell asleep on the floor. When I woke, I was floating. Not a weightless floating, but definitely not on the ground either. I moved my hand, breaking through a layer of webbing. They'd cocooned me midair, about 4 feet off the ground. The web sheet peeled away easily, and I just let it hang there. Honestly, that was the best sleep I've ever had. It'd only been 6 hours since I crashed, but I woke up feeling unstoppable, refreshed, like I could take on the entire world today. I think I'll sleep like that from now on. Anyway, I gotta get ready for work. I'll update y'all if anything else happens.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Consider this a warning to stay safe out there and get some sleep if you can.